Okay.
Yeah, so it so happens that one of the names which we've been reading, the lady was celebrated today, this female saint, Etheldreda of Ely, she's called. And she lived all her life in the 7th century in England. And it's quite interesting. We know somebody just turned something on here. We we know quite a lot about her because she was the daughter of a king, and so we know a lot about her from the history books as well as from our religious recollections, let's say. And she was the third daughter of somebody called King Anna. Now, in England in those times, there were quite a lot of kings. It wasn't really a united nation as England as we know it now. And he was the king of an area which we might call Anglia now, in the southeast of England. She was his third daughter, and from the start she wanted to be a nun. She came. There were other nuns in her family, some of her sisters. She wanted to be a nun, but as is the way when you're in a royal family, you don't get much of a choice. And she was married against her will to a king, a local king called King Tongbert. But he so respected her. He loved her very much, and he so respected her desire to be a nun that he allowed her to live as a nun, as his wife. Um, uh, and also, he loved her so much that he gave her an island called Ely, which is in Anglia. It's an interesting place, Ely. It's just a very small town, but it has a beautiful cathedral. And in those days, it was an island. It's not an island anymore because the surrounding land has been drained for farming, but it used to be an island. And he gave her this as a present. And eventually, I think he died in battle. I'm not too sure, in 655 or something. And then she went to this island of Ely, which he had given her, and she started to live as a nun and started forming a monastic community there. But again, her father didn't didn't want this for her and forced her to marry again, incredibly. And this time he forced her to marry a prince from the north. Um, his name was Elgfirth, I think. So he was a prince from Northumbria, which is the northern kingdom, was the northern kingdom of England, including places like Newcastle in the modern day, that kind of area. And what was interesting, so he was only 15 when she was forced to marry him, and he was going to become king of Northumbria. And but she said from the start that if I'll marry, but I'm going to live as a nun, and you have to accept this. And he agreed, this prince, and so they had this kind of marriage where she lived, let's say, as a nun, and then eventually he inherited the throne, this prince, and he became king of Northumbria. And this time he changed his mind, at this point, and he insisted to have, let's say, a full marriage, because he wanted the son, he wanted the heir, and she refused. And there was a lot of difficulty and argument, and eventually she ran away. She ran away to a monastery called Coldingham Monastery, female monastery, and she became a nun. Now, this is maybe not the normal way to become a nun, but it was a different time, and things happened differently. She became a nun, and eventually, I think the king of Northumbria kind of gave up on her, And then she returned to this island, Ely, that she'd been given, and she founded a monastic community there, which became the most powerful monastery in all of England for a period of time. It was very, very strong. It was a very rich monastery, and a very, very important one. An interesting little note from her life, from her death actually, is that she died of the plague, one of the bubonic plagues, which swept through Europe, at different times through over the centuries. And one of the symptoms particularly of the bubonic plague, is you get sometimes your neck swells up. You get kind of boobas, let's say, on your neck. And she had this when she died, but she believed, because she was so credentials, let's say, she believed that this was a punishment for her because she once wore a necklace, to make herself look beautiful. and so she believed as she died that this was her punishments, let's say, from God, and that she deserved it, you know. So a very interesting lady, and I think uh, it's interesting to reflect on her life, because probably we imagine ladies living in the 7th century had very little say in their life, let's say, and probably they just always had to do what they're told. But you can see she reversed everything. she was completely in charge, and the reason she could do it is because, as I was saying on Sunday in my small sermon, she wasn't a people pleaser, you know. She was just a God pleaser only, you know, and for this reason she was able to keep her virginity. She's known as a virgin. She's counted among the virgin saints. So a very interesting life, especially because of the time she lived in and her obvious devotion to God. But that's all. I don't have anything else on her. That's